Okay, so we'll just look at trusted providers. So super admin menu down to options and then trusted provider. So what is a trusted provider? A trusted provider is a provider which has a slightly higher level of privilege. What does that mean? Well, that means that first main privilege difference is, as you're probably aware, providers can't see every volunteer on the system like admins can. They can only see volunteers that are essentially that are linked to them, that they have a relationship with. That means volunteers who've previously been on their opportunities or registered via their provider profile page, or been invited by the provider, or been manually linked by the administrator. Administrators can link volunteers through to providers, but don't worry about that too much. Just accept the fact that providers can only see a certain amount of volunteers, not every volunteer on the system. Well, a trusted provider can potentially see every volunteer on the system, okay, because a trusted provider can add any volunteer on the whole system to one of their opportunities, where a normal provider can only manually add one of a volunteer if they're linked to them, if they're part of their cohort of volunteers they have access to. Okay, so trusted provider is usually a provider which is internal, like an internal provider within your organization, because obviously you're giving them potentially access to add every volunteer on the system onto one of their opportunities. So you wouldn't do that unless the person worked for your organization. So what can they do? So this page here is saying, well, what do you want to allow that provider to be able to do? So allow trusted providers to verify volunteer ID. So when you go to the volunteer's profile page, you can upload ID for the volunteer and you can say whether that ID has been checked. And this is saying, well, should you allow providers, the trusted providers, to be able to do that same thing, to be able to say, yes, I've seen this person's ID and I trust it. Verify the ID. Okay. Enable trusted provider access to community task interface. That's without going into that too much, it's to do with tasks, which is another kind of opportunity, and it's whether you want these providers to be able to create those and manage those particular tasks. I suggest, before you worry about that one, I suggest you look into what community tasks are initially. Next, we've got allow trusted providers to update DBS details, which is essentially criminal check details. So should trusted providers be able to do that? Okay, which means yes, this volunteer's got a DBS and I've seen it, and they can put in there, any details, what ID was provided and what level of criminal check it was, this, that, and the other. Normally reserved for administrators, but you can switch it on for trusted providers if you want to there. We've also got show criminal check options to trusted providers. So it's just saying, not only should they be able to change it, should you show it to them at all? Should they be able to see whether the volunteers had a criminal check or not? So that's yes or no option there. So hopefully that's useful. Like I say, with a couple of these here, you probably want to look into what a task is first before you start trying to understand whether you should switch it on or off. But the rest of them are quite straightforward. So hopefully that's useful. Thank you.